Welcome to The Chemical Show, the podcast where chemical means business. I'm your host, Victoria Meyer, bringing you stories and insights from leaders driving innovation and growth across the chemical industry. Each week, we explore key trends, real-world challenges, and the strategies that make an impact. Let's get started. Welcome back to The Chemical Show. Today, I am speaking with Jennifer Jewson, who is the Chief Procurement Officer at LyondellBasell, and Danielle Warnock, who is the Senior Manager of Global Carbon Business Strategy at Nouryon. And more importantly, both of them represent Together for Sustainability. We're going to learn a little bit more about what that is. Jen is the president of TFS and chairs the steering committee, and Danielle is the regional lead for TFS. And so both of them are here today to talk about what is TFS, what is sustainable procurement, why it matters, and more. So ladies, welcome to The Chemical Show.
Thank you for having us. We're happy to be here today.
Yeah, excited to have you. So I'm going to start with Jen. Tell us a little bit about your origin story and how you got to where you are in the chemical industry and in your current role.
So from a personal perspective, absolutely I can share. So I've been in the chemical industry actually almost 30 years, which is an amazingly long time. I'm a chemist by training actually, and moved over into the commercial area. And I've had several roles within our organization, whether it is on the sell side, or supply chain, et cetera. I moved over to procurement in the last 3 years. I took over as CPO, and it's a really, it's an exciting time for, I think, our industry in general, as we look at how we manufacture things today and doing it very differently than before. So this level of innovation, and for someone like me who originally came from R&D, it's very interesting. So for me, a natural progression for me was to find other areas where I could have impact and influence, specifically in the sustainability space.
Love it. That's great. Danielle, how about you? How did you get started in the chemical industry and to where you are today?
Yeah, really similar background to Jen. So my background is in chemical engineering. I started in R&D as well. And I really kind of moved through. I did not start in the chemical industry. I started in the industrial gases industry. So I would say close cousins. And I've held various roles in different types of design engineering before moving into supply chain. And so I spent about 6.5 years in different roles in procurement. Somehow sustainable procurement found me, and it was a really exciting, I think, pivotal turn. So still working in supply chain, really understanding how the value chain works and looking at those commercial aspects, but adding sustainability here at Nouryon. And so I did that for 3.5 years, which is how I found TFS as well. And now in my current role, I'm looking at really how do we integrate sustainability and carbon reduction opportunities into our day-to-day business decisions where it makes sense for us the most. So it's really exciting to look at how, like Jen mentioned, how the industry is changing and how we're evolving and how certain buzzwords like sustainability, even the definition of sustainability has changed since I've become part of this world.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're right. I think we're absolutely at a transformational inflection point in the industry. And sustainability is one of these areas that, I started hearing about it 20 years ago and I had no stinking idea what it meant. It's like, I don't get it. Like, I just don't get it. And then certainly in the 2020s, it feels like we've reached peak hype. And now we're getting back to reality because it is part of our longevity of our industry, the world, business, et cetera. So let's just talk a little bit about Together for Sustainability, because I know that some people may not be aware of the organization.
Yeah, I'd be happy to start with that. So, and I think Danielle and I will both agree we have a passion for that organization because it is so unique and so special. And why I say that is, what Together for Sustainability is really it's an industry alliance with over 50 petchem companies in. If you think about the spend that we touch in a given year, as a collective, we probably touch over $500 billion of spend. So when you have us together thinking about things, we really have impact and influence. Why I think it is so incredibly special is you look at the petchem industry. When I first started, we never talked to each other, right? Because we were so worried about antitrust and We were coached so much, don't talk about product and don't talk about price. But sustainability is this topic where you absolutely, one, have to collaborate, but now have the ability to collaborate, right, as we work together. So for me, I think TFS, the folks come in, we may touch the chemical industry a little bit differently here and there, and we all realize that there's not going to be a perfect answer for everything, but we all know that we have to make progress, and so therefore we've got to figure out what is that middle ground where we can make sure that people truly understand what we're trying to do from moving the needle from a sustainability perspective. And so the only way you can do that is if you are this industry alliance. And I always say we do together what we cannot do alone, which is why I think this organization is an incredibly special one.
Yeah, I really like that. What inspired your companies to get involved? So you guys have obviously been involved for quite a while, but your company must see something that says, yeah, this is worthwhile. Because Jen, I'm with you. I grew up in this era where you weren't allowed to say boo to competitors, much less collaborate inside of an industry group. I think some of that had always happened, but what really prompted that and inspired your companies? Maybe Danielle, can respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Jen hit it really well, I think, with describing TFS and really leveraging the power in numbers. And so with Nouryon here, we have three major pillars of sustainability, looking at environmental performance, looking at safety, and looking at sustainable growth. And really, it's how do we operationalize and make actions in these areas? And TFS really, this peer-to-peer organization in numbers where we can leverage making scaling impact is really where we saw that opportunity. So not only can TFS offer tools and community, but it's really like we're shaping the tools that we can use to really drive progress in this area. And so that's really one of the key drivers for Nouryon becoming a member back in April of 2023.
That's great. So obviously TFS operates as a member-driven initiative, right? So cutting across companies. Jen, you referenced 50 petrochemical companies. How does this really work? Because it's hard to create alignment, sometimes inside your own company, much less across companies. And yet TFS has obviously been very successful in its organization, in the initiatives it's taking out, guidelines and practices as we talk about sustainable procurement across the industry.
Why is it successful? I think so. We at LyondellBasell, we really, we have clear, just like Danielle was saying for Nouryon, we have clear goals and objectives of what we want to do from a sustainability standpoint. And if you think about why does TFS work so well, it is a collection of companies that are very like-minded. So you do have people that already have, very public goals that they want to achieve. They want to be leading edge. And so I think that helps it to give the momentum. So if you have people that are like-minded, understand that it's a very complex problem to solve and really want to lean in and do it, I think that's really what helps it. I will also share too that these types of alliances, and it's maybe not the most exciting part to talk about, governance matters, right? Like, how do you operate, right? And so the TFS office is incredibly well organized and driven to help us make sure that we can make the most of everybody's time, that we are very thoughtfully executing. And so we have multiple work streams. I think companies can lean into work streams differentially depending on what's most important to them. But we've aligned on what those are, and we make sure that we are making progress. And the folks that are there, you will have folks that are a little more sophisticated than others, right? Because they've been at it a little bit longer. Same for LyondellBasell. We joined in 21. We are leaps and bounds ahead of where I thought we would be. And it's because the fact that you have folks that are very sophisticated in these work streams that want to help you. So I do think, one, you've got the leaders that are pushing the boundaries so that we are doing really good things, but then they're also so collaborative that as you join, they help get you up to speed a lot faster and make a tremendous amount more progress.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And as you say, governance is key, especially to, manage antitrust concerns and also to be effective because, it's a choice for companies to be part of an organization like this. Obviously, there's a lot of business benefit, but it's also when you join, you want to be effective and know that it's going to be effective. So I'm going to take us back one step a little bit, and let's just talk about sustainable procurement and what is it? Because this is kind of the center point of what we're doing here today, and yet people may not fully understand what it is and what it means.
Yeah, I think I think that if you ask five different people, you might get five different definitions of what sustainable procurement might be, depending on what might be the hot topic at hand. But it's really thinking long term how decisions in our supply chain and our value chains affect the people, the planet, and profit of a company. And it's really how do we build resilience in our supply chains? How do we reduce risk? And how do we optimize an opportunity and growth in a sustainable and ethical manner? And where TFS really helps with that, again, is looking at that peer-to-peer model, looking at different types of tools where we can standardize and optimize our thought processes to really take action with our suppliers and engage and collaborate.
Yeah. And is this about understanding and measuring greenhouse gas emissions, logistics things? I guess does it tie like to the UN's, what is it, 23 sustainable practices, which include people and all these other things, or how does it all tie together?
It does. It does. And so I think it does tie to that, and it touches multiple areas, like Danielle was saying. So I think, if you think about, we try and figure out what are the big problems we're trying to solve. One is making sure our suppliers that we work with have the same ambitions that we do. And it could be on how they manufacture, how they treat their people. It's a number of facets. I think about economies of scale. Instead of 50 member companies going to the same supplier and asking the same questions over and over again, now we have it coming out from an organization asking questions. And so I think it makes it easier for the suppliers to work with us. It helps us to align ambitions with us. And so, one, are they trying to do all the right things? I think, product carbon footprint, so CO2 reduction, is very important too, and it's incredibly complex. So you think about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Scope 3 is usually our largest footprint for our companies, right? So for LyondellBasell, I think it to this point, our scope 3 footprint is somewhere around 78 to 80% of our overall footprint. It's
Wow.
big, right?
That is big.
And it's complicated, right? Because you're bringing all these different raw materials and things into your system from many different suppliers. So again, that's where I think discipline matters and consistency matters. There is still always going to be a little bit of variability, but I think where we can drive consistency, at least to an acceptable level, is going to be very important. Because why? At the end of the day, we want to be able to say, this is my baseline, and I'm going to show you, customer, what I am doing to make it better. And it does drive back to exactly what Danielle said earlier, and that is the value proposition, because it's not free. And the things that we do as a chemical industry are very hard to abate. We're energy intensive. And so I think it's important. It allows us this opportunity to truly explain to our customers how we do what we do, because they don't necessarily know, right? They know they order something and it comes to their door, but the process behind all of that, they don't necessarily, and nor do they need to know all of it, but they need to understand kind of what I would call the big steps to get to a more greener solution.
Yeah. It strikes me interesting, and I know that TFS is a lot about sustainable procurement, and yet your companies both are sellers of chemical products, often to other chemical companies, and often to final product producers that are, whether they're packaging, whether they're formulating, et cetera. How do you pull through some of these learnings into your sales team? Or do you? Is it still too early yet? Because you guys are both pretty young in your TFS journey.
Yeah, I could speak a little bit on behalf of Nouryon. So, I think we're probably not unique in this, but your sustainability goals and your targets, that comes from the top. And there's a lot of different functions and organizations across a company that need to work together to be able to meet those targets and goals. And sustainable procurement is one of those key functions, especially in the area of scope 3. But in order to make impacts in scope 3, one person's scope 3 is another company's scope 2. And so as you reduce emissions in your scope 1 and 2 as direct emissions for your company, you're therefore helping your customers reduce their scope 3 as they buy up. So really across the value chain, we're all so closely interconnected, regardless of really whether you're B2B or you're selling directly to customers. We all have to make these changes to be able to progress forward. And the way that Jen hit on talking about how scope 3 makes up the majority of our emissions right now. Well, if you think about it 5 years from now, as companies reduce their scope 1s, whether that's to meet regulations or to meet their own internal targets, and then our share of scope 3 is just going to continue to grow. And those complexities will continue to grow, but therefore will also start to reduce in those areas as scope 1 and 2 reduces. So it's all very interconnected, and procurement is really it's a pivotal piece of making those changes, but all of the different functions across a company need to be able to work together to meet those goals.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Sorry, maybe one thing to add to that too, that I think is very important is that some of our suppliers are also our customers, right? And so there is this interconnectivity that we see. And I think Danielle said it very well. I think sustainable procurement is one piece of the puzzle, but how you communicate across an organization is very, very important. And so I'm going to make a pitch for one other thing with TFS, and that's our TFS Academy, right? We have learnings that help people to understand sustainability and really learn through those modules. What we've done at LyondellBasell is we've taken a lot of those learnings and we make sure that the same messaging is very seamless to our customers as well. So we are speaking and using the same terminology and making sure we're educating across the board, because at the end you really have to make sure that you've got really good visibility to the end-to-end value chain, right? Because our customers, a lot of what we do is B2B, but we've got to make sure our customers are talking to their customers in a very similar light as we look at how does value transfer down that end-to-end value chain.
Yeah, it's complex. And I even just think about when you guys talk about scope 3, and Jen, you talk about 78 to 80%, which is, that makes sense. Because if I even just draw a box around my household, my personal scope 3 emissions have to be more than 80%. I don't know what they are. I know there's tools out there that'll do the math for you, but it's like, if we just look at it, all of it's about how we procure, how we utilize sustainably at a corporate level, at a personal level, and across industries. So you started talking about the academy, and you've also talked about how quickly you guys have both gotten up to speed. Let's talk about what TFS maybe offers for its members and new members, because both of you and your companies are actively engaged. But when somebody joins TFS, how do they get onboarded? What resources are available, and what kind of support is there to make their venture into sustainable procurement effective?
There are prepackaged things, so like the TFS Academy, which I think is incredibly helpful so that you are educating folks. And so one of the things that we did for us, and I'm going to talk about the other offerings in a minute, but we have what we call an ambassador program. So our sustainable procurement, we have folks that sit all through the organization. So we have procurement people that drive sustainable procurement, but we also have members of our businesses and supply chain and others that are ambassadors so that they hear what we hear. So when they communicate outward to their organizations, again, we're all in lockstep with each other, but we have certain goals and objectives, and we all have targets. So Danielle will have targets for Nouryon, we have targets for for LyondellBasell, but how many suppliers we're assessing, right? And it's, again, I'm going to go back to governance and structure, right? So that your data is trustworthy, good data, right? So, are you assessing your suppliers? TFS, we also audit certain suppliers that we think could be potentially at risk. The nice thing about the audits is we work with a supplier. We don't just say, okay, you have problems, you need to go fix them. We actually have corrective action plans to say, hey, here's some suggestions that could help you. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we're here for you. We want you to come along with us on the journey. So there's those things. The thing that is actually, I think, that a lot of us spend a lot of time on, including probably Danielle, is the product carbon footprint, because as we said, very complex, right? So we've worked together to look at and not reinventing the wheel, but taking the greenhouse gas protocol and figuring out like, how do we create guidelines that help people, if there are options of how to calculate the things that maybe make more sense for our industry to drive consistency, right? So, and maybe I'll stop on the last piece of it, and that is, okay, how do I calculate my data, which is fundamentally, foundationally the most important. But then how do we figure out how to share the data in a thoughtful way? And some companies are okay with sharing some of their data, some are not yet. So how do we navigate this? Because I think this is still, all of this is still growing and we're still learning from it. And again, I think it comes back to why it's so great to have collective organization, because it allows us to share and decide at the end maybe what we think might make the most sense for us as an organization.
Yeah. Are you guys able to actually share data, or, you talk about audits? Is that something that can be shared across companies inside of TFS, or is it more that it's a standard process for auditing that gets shared?
Yeah, we have our own audit that is performed by verified and approved third-party auditors. And we go through all the different types of data privacy before any of the suppliers that are approached go through this audit. And TFS has a platform that's a shared platform with the TFS community. So that really, to Jen's point earlier, where we're reducing the workload, right? So lots of us are all interconnected, lots of us share similar suppliers. So if one TFS company asks a supplier to go through an audit, they're not going to have to do it again for another TFS company, because it'll be on a shared platform that is data protected and goes through the correct antitrust processes before any data is shared. So it really does help. And to add on to Jen's, moving back to the PCF calculations, not only does TFS have the PCF guidelines published, but there's also a data exchange platform called Seagreen. And that really, it's helping companies create a standardized way to share this data in a similar format, in a similar place. I think that all of us could probably relate to all the different types of Excel spreadsheets, through emails, all the different types of NDAs, CDAs that we need to go through as all of us are maturing in this space and understand what data is okay to share, and like Jen said, which companies are not okay to share. So this platform, right now we're piloting using the platform and are seeing a lot of good use cases for it. So as more companies become familiar with it and share, I think it'll be a really good way to standardize data exchange. And try and alleviate some of those Excel spreadsheets that we all are just too familiar with.
Well, and I think that's excellent, because it is a challenge, and right, and when you're running these things on Excel, or you ask the question slightly differently, who's answering, how is it answered, it can get interpreted in a lot of different ways. And I think just the consistency of standards, consistency of data, and to your point, let's be efficient with this. Like, we don't need 50 companies asking a supplier the exact same thing. Ask it once, manage it appropriately, and share appropriately, because it's the same information. So it seems like the industry and the public, and certainly government, we're in a period of flux on sustainability, right? And I think of it as we've gone from sustainability with a big S, with these big giant promises, down to sustainability with a little s, where it's just about being sustainable and having sustainable practices. And we've even seen across the chemical industry projects getting delayed that had a high sustainability component, other things moving forward. And I think this whole space that we're in a lot right now is a lot around strategic discipline, doing the right thing step by step to get there. How does this factor into your companies and your work with TFS in terms of, are your customers still and stakeholders still prioritizing sustainability? Is this something that you guys are still focused on? And obviously you're here today and we're talking about it, but how has the narrative changed, and where is the narrative today around that for you guys?
Yeah, we're really looking at it, from a business opportunity and growth perspective, and again, integrating it into our day-to-day business practices. Sustainability, the big S, the little s, it's not a trend, it's here to stay. And again, like we've mentioned, like the definition might change over time, but it's future proofing business. And if companies are approaching that with the right mindset, it'll really be a strategic differentiator when going out to market. Not every market, like you mentioned, there's some projects that are paused or delayed, but there are new projects that are coming up to speed. And so that pipeline, I think, is going to continue to change and evolve. But regulatory pressures are going to continue to arise, and companies are going to have to stand tall and rise to the occasion. It's really thinking strategically about how do we change or revise our approach to sustainability to do that in a smart and methodical manner.
Yeah, and I agree with Danielle 100%. I think we're playing a long game here, right? And I think today the chemical industry is going through a downturn, which does make it a lot more challenging. This will pass. It's our industry is cyclical. We will get back up to the upper end of the cycle. I think too that sometimes you have to go slow to go faster later. And this may be just part of the maturity process. This is not an easy problem to solve, right? And regions think about things differently. And most of our companies ship globally. So how do you think about, like, how do we get to this point where we are understanding what are the rules of engagement for each of the regions to drive these things? And different governments think differently and all of that. So I don't consider this a negative. Yes, we all wish we were moving a little bit faster, but I do think this is probably part of the maturity process. And I agree with Danielle, it will be a differentiator. We want to make sure that we deserve the right to operate because we are doing the right things for our customers. I also think too that I do a lot of university recruiting, and when I go and talk to the folks about coming into our industry, the first thing they ask me is about sustainability. So it is on the hearts and minds of the newer generation that will become part of the workforce. Today, what they don't have is disposable income, but they will, right? They will. They'll come into the industry. And so I do think that as the generations change, I do think you will see a shift on how people buy. So I constantly say it's not if, it's just when. And so if it takes us a little longer to get these projects moving, maybe that's okay, because you have to understand what is the value proposition at the end of the day and the risk level. And Danielle said it earlier, and I agree 100% on the risk piece. I'm going to go back to our industry is very hard to abate and very costly. And if you're really going to put hundreds of millions of dollars into something, gosh, you got to be right that you're going to get something out the other side. And so if it takes a little bit of time to get to that maturity level, I think that's fine. I do.
I love that. And I do think you're right. It is a long game. And I think some of the early promises and goals and things targets that were set around sustainability and greenhouse gas reductions, et cetera, aspirational. And yes, and you need to shoot for those aspirations. But all of a sudden you start realizing, oh, this is really, really hard. And we've moved a long way. I spoke with Bonnie Tully last year from Avonic, and I remember one of the things she said is, in the 70s, clean air and clean water and the Clean Air Act, which came out, I think, late 70s, early 80s, that was a big deal. And yet today it's table stakes. Of course, we focus on clean air and clean water. And then if we look ahead to where we are today in 2025, we go to 2030, of course, sustainability and sustainable practices and sustainable procurement makes sense. It becomes table stakes. And it is a long journey that we're on, continuous improvement, et cetera, all of that. So this is, we're kind of wrapping here at the end. 2 questions. Question 1 is just as it relates to TFS. Obviously, there's 50 companies. There's room for more. How and, what's your advice to companies that are considering it, and how do they get involved in TFS?
So we do have a process to join, and and honestly, it's a pretty thorough screening process, right? Because it's important for us to make sure that people that want to join want to lean in. And Danielle's a perfect example, right? They joined in 23. She's already the regional lead. She's doing great things from her side. That is, we want that energy and enthusiasm. And why is that the case? It's because it's a member-led company. So it's not about putting the TFS logo on your website. We really want people, we want to understand how mature are you in this process? What is your ambition? And really, are you ready to lean in and really work with us, right? Because that is how we make a difference in this organization. And so, those are the things we ask people. And so, if you're interested, we'd love to have you and talk to you about it. But realize, like, you have to put the sweat equity into this organization, because we're only here today because of the strength of the member base.
Love that.
It really is member led. And, we all have our day jobs and we all have to react, right? And we understand what the current environment is with the sustainability word. But when you come to the TFS meetings, we do have in-person annual workshops, the energy, because the members that are part of this organization are so passionate about the topic. And so they want to drive change. And it is a safe space with all of the antitrust that's in place to really have positive conversations and interactions and networking to be able to come to solutions that, might make sense in today's state to be able to make a difference. And so, we have that event coming up. And I'm really looking forward to seeing my peers and my colleagues and to be able to have that energy again. So if there's companies out there that, you have those people in your organizations that are really passionate about this topic, it is a great outlet to get involved and make things happen.
Love it, love it. And I think this is actually a great place to wrap. So thank you, ladies, for joining me today on The Chemical Show. I've really enjoyed talking with both of you, learning about you and learning more about TFS Together for Sustainability.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And thanks everyone for joining. Keep following, keep listening, keep sharing, and we will talk with you again soon. Thanks for joining us today on The Chemical Show. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and most importantly, share it with your friends and colleagues. For more insights, visit thechemicalshow.com and connect with us on LinkedIn. You can find me at Victoria King Meyer on LinkedIn, and you can also find us at The Chemical Show Podcast. Join us next time for more conversations and strategies shaping the future of the industry. We'll see you soon.